phenomenal. She goes, here's the challenge. It costs about $300,000 a year for the medication. And 2, it's not yet available in Canada. It's only just approved by the FDA in the US. So when you get these gene therapies, you're back on the ice. Everything's changed.
Yes.
So you've got, and the earlier we can get kids these, I mean, I was in my 40s when I got it. So there's obviously some damage that's being done, but I'll be here well into my 90s, I'm sure.
Punto Medio.
Bienvenidos sean ustedes un día de hoy a Punto Medio. Te tengo, como siempre, a Mark Keeley, quien es mi co-host. Bienvenido, Mark, nuevamente. Bienvenido. Y como invitado tenemos a Chris Macleod. Él es un abogado muy famoso canadiense que, aparte de ser un excelente profesional, detrás de él hay una historia que contar, una historia que conocer, un ejemplo de vida, no tan solo para personas que lo han vivido, sino en general. Es un ejemplo de vida, un ejemplo de profesional.
And bienvenidos a todos. It's interesting, Gabby, when you talk about how inspiration really drives the Christmas season and the end of the year. And I'm just delighted to introduce my good friend and I gotta say, best-selling author these days, Chris Macleod. I've known Chris, Gabby, for many, many years, probably over 30 years. Wow. One of the things, yes, and Chris is, you're right. At the outset, you said Chris is a great lawyer, and he is a great lawyer. His firm, Cambridge LLP, does work in Canada, in the United States, and in Asia. Very, very good firm. But what people don't know about Chris is that Chris, and I'll get to you in a second, Chris. I just want to make sure that people know that you wrote this book because you, and it's not a secret, but people just don't know that you suffer a dreadful disease, cystic fibrosis. And for the most part, people who have cystic fibrosis don't live a very long life. Chris has not only lived a long life, he's beaten the odds. So when you think about his book, Beating the Odds, which is really right now a bestseller, I think it makes a heck of a lot of sense that we have Chris on to inspire us as we end 2022. Chris, welcome to the show. It's good to have you here.
Bienvenido.
Gabby, Mark, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm a big fan of your show,
Thank you.
as I know are the millions of people who view it on a regular basis. So it's great to be here.
Thank you. So, Chris, I wanted to start out. What inspired you to write this book?
Great question. 2020, when we had COVID fall upon us around the world, everyone was told in cities across Canada and the rest of the planet, stay home, stay 6 feet apart, wear a mask. And obviously COVID ultimately is a respiratory condition. That's why people are getting on life support. Well, it is eerily similar to cystic fibrosis. Patients with CF have been told for years we have to stay as between CF patient to CF patient 6 feet apart and wear a mask because there's certain bugs that only CF people are affected by. And let's call it COVID for our purposes. This COVID-like bug that only affected CF people, we became very used to in hospitals, staying 6 feet apart, or even socially, not socializing and staying 6 feet apart. So when everyone was very concerned, as everyone should have been with COVID, I thought, I should pen some of my thoughts on the mental tools I've used to weather the storm and beat the odds with CF. So that was the genesis of it, as everyone was legitimately concerned for their health. They were worried about lung impairment, ending up in an ICU, and possibly expiring. I thought, let's give us a few lessons and some stories of my experience. Just to go by background, so CF, when I was born in '69, life expectancy was 4. 4 years old.
It's terrible.
Then it went to 6 years old and 8 years old as new medications became available. By the time I was 40 or 42, life expectancy was about that. And this was in 2012. I hit the wall with CF at the time. My lung function plummeted to less than 30% lung function. I was on 4 liters of oxygen a minute at St. Mike's Hospital, in the hospital for about 6 months running. Or actually 4 of 6 months I was in the hospital.
And St. Mike's Hospital is in Toronto.
Canada's Urban Angel.
Okay.
Phenomenal facility. My Dr. Tullis and my team at St. Mike's are second to none. And they're the reason, in large part, that I'm here today. So my doctor knocks on the door. She comes in to my room at St. Mike's and says, Chris, I've got good news and bad news. I said, moratorium on bad news, good news only. She said, Chris, you have a rare form of CF. You have the Delta 551 gene type. It's a genetic condition. And she said, there's a company in Boston, Vertex Pharmaceuticals, and they have a just entered the market medication that should normalize this gene defect so that you'd be back on the ice. At least that's the plan. If it doesn't work, we're going to put you on a heart-lung transplant because that would be the alternative in your last stages with CF. So I said, phenomenal. She goes, here's the challenge. It costs about $300,000 a year for the medication. And 2, it's not yet available in Canada. It's only just approved by the FDA in the US. I said, yeah. And she said, well, there's a special access program. We've applied for it. We should have 24 hours notice and you'd get the drug. The company will give it to you on compassionate grounds because you'll be not around by December if we don't. This is October at the time. So I said, okay, terrific. Let's get the application in. We have a denial from the government to allow it in, even though it was costing nothing to the government. We had a skirmish, and Mark, you were instrumental, as were so many great Canadians who stepped up to the plate to help me get it. We ended up accessing the drug within 10 days. I was 60% lung function, no longer on 4 liters of oxygen, running up and down hills. And now in the situation I'm in now, which is great. So the condition is now totally normalized. But I went right to the midnight hour before I ended up with a chance. And many people haven't, obviously, because they didn't make it to that point in time. And even then, we've had a lot of fights politically to get that drug access for people who don't have group private insurance plans. So beating the odds tells that story of how to survive a hospital stay. And I go through be the CEO of your own health, about attitude, the tools and tactics that I used to get me to the finish line. So that's what I wanted to share in that COVID era we've just been in.
Chris, help our viewers understand.
Yeah.
The way it's been described to me, if you have cystic fibrosis, it's like you drown every night. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely your lungs filled with fluid.
Yes.
And you got to get rid of that fluid, and the fluid can be infected. And so obviously it's a challenge. The new gene therapies are the first of precision medication that actually normalize genetic defects.
Right.
And it's a game changer. And there's more to come, both on the CF front, but also for all the other gene conditions.
And help our viewers understand, how many people suffer from cystic fibrosis as a percentage of the population?
As a percentage, it'd be very low. In Canada, I think we have 4,600 patients. It would be what's considered a rare disorder.
A rare disorder.
Yeah.
But the fact that you now have this medication,
yes,
it's actually put you in a position where you would actually beat the odds and live longer and healthier because of what you got in terms of the medication.
Now it's a game changer. So when you get these gene therapies, you're back on the ice. Everything's changed.
Yes.
So you've got, and the earlier we can get kids these, I mean, I was in my 40s when I got it. So there's obviously some damage that's being done, but I'll be here well into my 90s, I'm sure. And I've got a medical team that I'm confident will be agreeing with me on that point. But can you imagine we get a kid who's 6 with this medication? The world and the sky's the limit. They don't have to worry about hospitalizations, and we've now done that in Canada. So gene therapies are covered.
Right, and you made a comment at the outset that you said this medication costs $300,000 a year. How do people afford this?
Well, they'd only afford it if they have a group benefit plan, like I do, like the government workers do. Lots of employees have group benefit plans, or if the public system covers it.
Right.
And I've always said we need to have a robust private group benefit plans through employment. And when someone doesn't have work or they don't have employment that covers it, then the government can step in.
Right.
And the people will be earning, when they're back on the ice being productive, which is what everyone wants to be.
Yes.
They'll pay tax dollars and everyone rises with the tide. Right? When people are on the ice in the game of life, they're creating opportunities for themselves and for others. And that's what it's all about. And at the end of the day, government's job is to help everyone be as productive and creative as they possibly can be, reach their full potential.
That's fantastic. So for patients who'll be watching this in, say, Peru or other Latin American countries or in Mexico, and they have cystic fibrosis, can they get access to this kind of gene therapy that you're talking about?
That's a great question. I don't know about every specific country. I know that close to 30 countries have covered this medication for CF patients. And where they haven't and someone has the condition, then there's potentially compassionate use programs, which most pharmaceutical companies have for patients. And most governments and countries have exceptional access programs for game-changing medications.
Right.
We're talking about medications that it's like a light switch is turned on in the person's life. And so you've got them fully engaged and productive members of society driving forward. So I don't know when you say Peru specifically or other countries, but I know we've got 30 countries covered where CF has a percentage of the population.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, Gabby, at the outset, you talked about Chris being famous here in Canada for what he's done. One of the things I think, Chris, that people don't know about you, notwithstanding what you're talking about today, is that you have fought really hard in Canada on access to these kinds of medications. And, you know, you said you got declined by the government at the outset. How do you keep your motivation and your positivity?
One thing, I mean, I've had all the problems I've had in life. One thing I haven't had a challenge with is being upbeat and motivated. You know, people I think are inherently good.
Yes.
And when you put forward a reasonable case to people, ultimately reason and decency prevail. I mean, it's positivity, positive motivation is really the key ingredient. It creates momentum. And with momentum, tides change and great things can happen. The access to medication front that we had in Canada, I always thought in Canada pre-2012, when I had my own challenge with the system, that whatever anyone needed, they had covered. We have great care in hospitals when you have a diagnosis and you need to get into a hospital to deal with, and you need a therapy or a treatment for cancer or CF or other conditions. But now that we're in the era of medication as being part of a game-changing process, like a gene therapy, which is a pill you take twice a day, our system wasn't ready for it. And we have the most complex, convoluted system of access to life-saving medications you could ever create.
And that's not a compliment, right?
No, I don't say that as a compliment. It's a disaster, the way the Canadian system is. So when I got out of the hospital, the first thing I thought is, well, I better call the Deputy Minister's office responsible for this, the health file, let them know what a phenomenal medication that I was now on so they could have it listed on the formulary and make it available. Once the drug was entered into the Canadian marketplace, my private plan covered it within 30 days.
Wow.
And the company matches the copay. So I've been on the private or a group benefit plan since 2012 with incredible success. So I called the Deputy Minister's office, or the ADM, Assistant Deputy Minister's office, and said, I'd like to speak to the ADM. I've got some important information to relay. I said, well, they don't meet with individuals. I've had my first red flag. Well, that doesn't make sense. As a citizen, I can't speak when I've got important information to download. So they said, well, speak to organizations. I said, well, I'm not going to call an organization to relay a message. So I'm blessed with a lot of great friends and people who come up, like you, Mark, who were there when I needed you the most. So I called a friend of mine who was a corporate lawyer. So let's create the the Canadian Cystic Fibrosis Treatment Society to advocate for medication for people. I said, I'll be the chair, 2 or 3 friends to be on the directors. I wrote back a couple of hours later when I received the letter. And I said, I'm now the national chair of the Canadian Cystic Fibrosis Treatment Society. Can I have a meeting? I didn't get a reply. So that's when I knew we had a challenge on our hands. And we ended up doing a 2-pronged approach: litigate and advocate. Advocate in the boardrooms and creating greater public awareness, and litigating.
Litigating means using the
lawsuits.
courts. Yeah.
We sued, launched a class action in British Columbia. In Canada, they have medical assistance in dying. Section 7 of our charter is the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. The courts had said, you have a right to doctor-assisted suicide or medical assistance in dying. I said, what about medical assistance in living? Don't we have a charter right, not to any form of medical treatment, but medical assistance to live? And Lilia Zahariva was one of our rep plaintiffs, actually was the first to introduce me to that concept. It was right on. So she was a rep plaintiff, along with another individual, both of whom had CF, but did not have access to gene modulators. And so we sued for the government and the agencies the government had created. And we ultimately, that case didn't go anywhere because the government ultimately funded the treatment for everyone who needs it across the country.
Lucky.
Wonderful.
That's good.
Los dejo con nuestro principal sponsor, que es Conceptos Construction Corporation.
Punto Medio.
The construction industry has leaped into enormous growth in architectural projects. Every project today brings its own challenges beyond new paradigms. With over 25 years of experience, Conceptos has provided engineering design into project and project management for over 300 projects. From complete turnkey to project manager, leave the building to the professionals. We specialize in the development of effective industrial processing solutions in multiple industry sectors. Plant closure and demolition services for industrial facilities offered include emptying and cleaning equipment such as holding tanks, piping network, processing equipment, and laboratories. We offer all types of underground plumbing services that specialize for meeting food and pharmaceutical industry standards. Conceptos Construction Corporation.
Punto Medio.
So we were talking just before the break, Gabby, about Chris actually intervening, I'd say, in terms of how we get government to move on the market access opportunities for these kinds of therapies. And it's been an uphill challenge, right?
It's been a huge battle. When we set up the CF Treatment Society, our goal was do whatever it takes to advocate for those vulnerable patients who need, by their doctor's prescriptive, life-saving therapies. And we will take on hospitals, insurance companies, health charities, government, whoever may be a roadblock in the way. And we'll do it whether it's litigating, a lawsuit, as one option, or advocating, bring general public awareness.
So where are you right now in terms of litigation with or against the government on access opportunities?
Okay, on the CF gene therapies, that's covered. So we don't have any litigation going, and all the advocacy efforts have proven successful. And it wasn't just the Treatment Society, an organization called CF Get Loud, which was a movement of CF patients, led by a phenomenal group of people, and CF Canada were instrumental. And all the families that came together to try to get these treatments for their kids.
Why do you have to do this? Why can't government just see that this is important? You've got, this is dreadful. It rips people apart, rips families apart. You talked about medical assistance in living. That should be the focus of government, don't you think?
Oh, I completely agree. But the trouble is when you get the bureaucracy, there's a quote from one U.S. president who said, what are the 9 scariest words in the English language? Hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. The road to hell can be paved with good intentions. Right. Obviously, they go to work and they want to do a great job.
Right.
The people who run these agencies. The challenge is they're viewing the consumer they're worried about protecting is the government. It's the payer, not the consumer, who is the individual, right? So they're thinking, and listen, I get it, you've got a limited pool of money. You need to be responsible. But when you have a life-saving, game-changing therapy, that's the medication you need to get into people's hands. And there's very few game-changing therapies.
Right. Chris, you hear a lot about, there's 3 aspects on how you list a drug on a government-paid formulary, whatever. The first is, safety. Does it do harm or not? Does it actually help? The second is efficacy. Is it effective? Does it work? And the third is cost. And I think what we're seeing now with government is it's just cost.
Yeah.
So to me, that's the challenge that you've sort of undertaken to try to change in the way that government thinks and operates around these kinds of access opportunities. The reason I bring this question up is, Gabby said you do have this unbelievable positiveness to you when you're having to fight all of this stuff and deal with the dreadful disease you have, and you stay positive, and you have really beaten the odds when you think about what you've done. So you wrote this book.
Yeah.
And the book from our perspective, it's a great book. I've read it several times. I've given a lot of copies out because I think people are really inspired by what you say. Gabby and I, before the show, were talking about some of the chapters. Mm-hmm. In one chapter, and we kind of laughed about this, when you ask Chris Macleod, how are you? How are you doing? You always answer the same way, never better. Why?
Okay, I'm a student at Dennis Mills amongst many others. And Dennis had a great turn of phrase.
Who's Dennis Mills?
Dennis Mills was a member of Parliament he was elected in 1988 into mid-2000s. And he had that turn of phrase. And I'd go into a description of what exactly it is. And it's just a sharp, crisp way of saying that you're never better now, never better than you've ever been before. Seize the moment. Be grateful for the time you have. That you're grateful, you're enthusiastic, you're excited about the day. It's just a nice, sharp, tight, crisp way of saying it. And some people, and there's lots of ways you can say, how are you? Terrific. Never better. Super. It does a lot for the people who hear you say it.
Yes.
Because we're in a world where and there's lots of tough things that are going on in the world. There's good reason to always be concerned, and also in people's lives. But regardless of the situation you face, you've got to. It's mandatory. It's not optional. You've got to take a positive approach to life. It just makes, no matter what happens, it makes the experience of living that much better.
Fantastic.
That is a great lesson that we're hearing here today for everyone.
Exactly. In here too, Chris, you talk about not only do you have to show up, but you have to show up like you always wear a suit. You're always dressed up, and you talk about that in the book too. Tell us why.
I love this one. I can't remember who said it, but there's numerous people who've said this before. Get up, dress up, show up. You never know what's going to happen in life. One of the things I always made a point of doing in the hospital when I was an inpatient, set the alarm, wake up, even if you just throw water on your face. If you can they don't have showers in rooms, you have to go down the hall, and during COVID, they wouldn't let you down the hallway that often. Get up, dress up. I would always get dressed and make my bed. Even if you're so sick, you have to go back and lie on it again. That exercise of taking on the day changes your frame. It also sends a message to all the people, the staff in the hospital, nurses, doctors, that you are in the fight. If you're getting up, and I would always get up, I'm a morning person generally, but I would specifically always be up well before shift change. So usually it's 7 a.m. shift starts and ends at 7 p.m. You want the staff leaving shift, the nurses and team, and the staff coming on to see that you're getting up at the fight right when they're coming on to work with you for the next 12 hours. It's a powerful message to send, and it inspires yourself. Because even though you may feel sick and tired, and you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, get up, put on a shirt, brush your teeth, wash your face, and I'd always make a cup of coffee. Hospital coffee's terrible. You can't drink that stuff. So I always had a bag of coffee, a Bodum, and a kettle. And every morning I would put the coffee in, nice smell of fresh coffee, play some music. Even if you've got your IV in your arm and you're on oxygen, you can still get up for the most part, unless you're incapacitated totally. But with CF, you can usually still move around for the most part. And even if it means just get up, walk to the sink, most rooms have a sink in them, and then back to bed to lie, but make sure that bed is made. powerful message to yourself and others, but also to others, because they'll be more engaged with you, and you build a team spirit. I have another chapter called "Be the CEO of Your Own Health." You need to lead by example to the team that are your caregivers. I mean, every patient you come in is phenomenal. That you've got the orderlies, the porters, the people who clean the room, the nurses, people who take blood, X-ray technicians. You've got nurse shift changes, and so it's not the same nurse, it's different nurses. That whole team, the doctors, the interns, the residents, you want everyone to know that you are in this full steam. And it helps inspire them, and hopefully elevates the mood in the ward as well. So that's part of the plan.
It is fantastic, and you just you're putting yourself in the position where your positiveness is actually rubbing off on the people that are around you who work with you.
Yeah, because you want them; they can co-equally inspire you.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about creating momentum. You do not know when the break in the game is going to come. I mean, Mark, I was in that hospital. It wasn't until September 22nd, 2012, that Dr. Tullis came in and told me, "Chris, good news for the medication." I had no clue. There was a gene called Delta 551. I knew it was a genetic condition.
Yes.
I didn't know that there was even research, and the company was that close to finding a solution. It was not on my radar. I went in June, so June, July, August, September. That's about a full 4 months that I'm in there, and you don't have, I didn't know about it. So you just don't know when the break in the game comes.
Right.
Just get up and, hustle hard, even if all you're hustling is doing is getting up, making a bed, and lying back on it.
So Chris, it would be very easy, especially for anybody that had cystic fibrosis, to say, you know what, I'm so angry. I'm angry that this happened to me. I'm angry that I'm feeling like this, but you don't.
No, but it's not just me. I know so many people. I tell stories of patients I've known. One young guy in particular, Courtney Boyle was his name. And he was the most inspirational. He had, take my attitude, you think I've got a good one, take that times 10, that was Courtney. I met him when he was maybe 7 or 8 years old. And he ultimately passed. I don't know how old he was, but he was a child when he died. But it wasn't for lack of having fight in this game. His attitude was phenomenal. And honestly, so many people who have had a health challenge, this is not a unique, there's no unicorn moment in this story. They're everywhere you go. You want to find great inspiration, find people who have great challenges. And you will be inspired across the board. Wow,
that's amazing. I want to talk a bit about the chapter you wrote in here about the power of prayer. I think, we're in the Christmas season, notwithstanding that it's a good time for reflection on family and our faith, whether you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew, faith is important, and prayer is important. How did you come about to write that chapter, and what does it mean to you?
Prayer, I'm Roman Catholic is my practicing faith. And I'm sure a lot of your viewers in the Spanish-speaking world are also Roman Catholic, but certainly Christian. And regardless of what faith you have, prayer is how you, when you've got your darkest moments, there's lots of aspects to prayer. There's prayer when you have dark moments and you pray for strength, like the Garden of Gethsemane, famous Christian scene where Jesus himself prays for strength. And then there's moments where you pray because you're just grateful for all the gifts you've received. One of the moments I describe in the book about the power of prayer, there's the moments where you pray for yourself for strength, and there's the time when other people pray for you. So my mom called me, it was the Sunday before. This is very, there's no such thing as a coincidence. This is an example of the power of prayer. Sunday, my mom calls me. She's in Saskatoon, I'm in Toronto at St. Mike's. She says, Chris, I've got to tell you, I absolutely know something great's going to happen this week. My instant with the doctor is the following day. She said, I know something great's going to happen. I said, I hope you're right. I'm sure it is. And I'm no, Chris. And she had that tone of convincing certainty. She said, I've been praying for you. Everyone's been praying for you. And I know something's going to happen. And I knew that people were praying for you. When people pray for you, you can feel it. It's that's why whenever you go to church, people raise their voices in prayer together. And sure enough, next morning at 9 a.m., that's when the doctor came in and said, Chris, good news and bad, you have this rare form. Now, some people might say, well, Chris, that company had already started the research, and things had already were progressing well before your mother and other people started praying for you, of course. But it only became apparent and pointed in my life at that moment. So I choose to attribute it to the power of prayer, and I don't think you can deny. Look, I didn't even know the research was going on. My doctor didn't interceded at that moment in time, and everything collided together to get me the access on compassionate grounds, which then had 4 months later, I was on through my private plan. But for all those factors coming together, and the prayers of so many people in churches and prayer groups around the country, that's the power of prayer. That's a clear example. Another example I give of praying myself. This was about 10 years before I was in first year law school, and I had a terrible infection hit me. My lungs were bleeding profusely. They just wouldn't stop bleeding. And I remember I was out of steam. I'm in first year law school. I'm in a hospital for literally weeks. And we have 100% finals, and they're in December. And I thought to myself, boy, God, whatever you want is going to happen is going to happen. I put it all to you. And an incredible sense of strength and calm, peace came over me. And then I was about to do a very serious procedure where they put tubes down your throat, but they can't put you under. It's a bronchoscopy. I hope they've gotten better, because they were horrific procedures, but I had absolutely no concern, complete peace. You know, the famous line, we were talking about this is the season, peace be with you, right? It's the season of peace. What is the famous line that Jesus always says? My peace I give you, my peace I leave with you. I mean, ultimately, that is the parting gift, one of them, that we're left with. And I prayed myself for strength and received peace. I've had other people pray for me and had phenomenal movements of the tide. I mean, it's like a parting of the sea to get access to a life-saving medication at my darkest hour. When look at little Courtney, young Courtney, didn't make it to the finish line, but he inspired me. It's not about my optimism. It comes from others like a Courtney and so many others, hundreds of them.
Isn't that great, Gabby?
It is great.
Fantastic.
It is, yeah, it's like an example, like I said before, that we should learn, and we have to be thankful, because the health is definitely one of the is the best things that we can have.
Absolutely.
The best
It's
things.
everything.
Without
It's
health, we're nothing.
So before you, I wanted to talk about three things.
Okay.
Number one, you want to talk about what's going to happen with this book in 2023, but hold on with that for a second. The other is you have a Latin American relationship. Your significant other is from a Latin American country.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about.
Okay, so we were in Guatemala, and was coming out of a convent that had been converted to a church. Sorry, it was a convent converted to a hotel place, and there was a individual who was selling rosaries. And I walked out, and people were selling you stuff on the street, and would start bartering. Well, so I said, oh, he has 250 quetzales. I said, here's 50. He said, okay, took it. He got on the camera, I said, oh my gosh, what have I done? I'm bartering for a rosary. That's ridiculous. So I said, hands on deck, let's go find the gentleman. I gave him 200 to make it right. Pan to a good friend of mine, Dennis, who Mills, collects the rosary. So I then said, I'm going to give this to Dennis. That was in August. Well, sure enough, 5 months later, I finally give it to him. This was about 2 weeks ago. And I handed Dennis the rosary. And he walks out the front door, I walk out the back door of the restaurant. He calls me and says, Chris, I just ran into somebody who their significant other or family member was really in rough streets in the hospital, but they love the rosary. So he gave the individual the rosary. Now tell me the confluence of factors, if that isn't divine intervention. How is it that I ended up with a rosary? I hold on to it for 5 months, meaning to give it to this person. I could have given it to him a while ago. And the very day I give it to him, he crosses paths with somebody he hasn't seen in years, who's a significant person in their life, loves the rosary and needed it.
Wow.
So there's another example.
God works in mysterious ways.
ways.
Sure is.
Yeah,
Sure is. And you also have a relationship with Mexico through your father.
Okay, my father and both. My mother goes to just outside of Cancun, Tulum.
Yep.
Has a place there, and my father is in Quintana Roo.
Wow.
Oh,
Every winter, so Oaxaca. So Oaxaca and Tulum.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great, Chris.
Yeah.
So there is a sort of a Latino connection.
That's
Always,
right.
always.
That's right.
Which leads me to my third. Tell us a bit about what's going to happen with this book in 2023.
yeah, I'm curious about
So
that.
in 2023, the Spanish edition is coming out.
Oh, really?
It will be available in Spanish. Yes, yeah.
That's a great
That's
news.
fantastic.
You
Yeah,
see,
yeah.
beating the odds. We will have it in Spanish very, very soon.
¿Cómo se dice
Exactly.
beating the odds en español?
Sería como combatiendo nuestros temores o algo así, pienso.
Excellent.
O nuestros mitos.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Así que todas las personas que somos hispanohablantes ya sabemos que este año 2023, el próximo año, vamos a tener este libro inspiracional en español para que todos aprendamos a tener esa fuerza, ese positivismo que Chris nos enseña el día de hoy y que ha tenido su voluntad y su paciencia de venir y contarnos estas cosas
Exacto.
que son muy personales.
Sí, sí.
Muy personales. So we are very thankful because you are here today. You are being so open to tell us about a little bit more about your personal life, about the things that you have to be facing and how you defeat them. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for
Thank
having
you.
me.
No,
It's a
Chris,
pleasure.
fantastic. And we wish you the very best for the holiday season and for 2023. And for you, our viewers, too.
Próximamente los esperamos con un nuevo e interesante tópico y por supuesto con un nuevo invitado de lujo como el día de hoy. Y que tengan unas felices fiestas de fin de año en todos los aspectos.
Sí, sí, sí. Gracias.
Muchas
gracias. A
gracias.
todos. Muchas gracias.